Well, I bet you didn't expect to see me wearing headphones and sunglasses. You like the look? I'm not too sure. Anyway, I had an eye infection. I didn't get it cleared up until this morning, so here I am. The reason I'm really here is that we have a fabulous guest and story to hear, so let me just pile on ahead. Did you know that about 36 to 40% of divorces in the United States now involve adults age 50 plus? And did you understand, although maybe if you talk to your girlfriends, you probably would get this, but women are the primary drivers of this trend, initiating approximately 2/3 of divorces in later life. Becky Whetstone, known as Dr. Becky, is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and that may be a little strange or seem a little strange when you hear that, in fact, Dr. Becky has been married not once, not twice, but 4 times. That's it, count it. So how have those failures impacted both her choice of profession and her method of working with couples who think they want out? And we all know about that feeling, don't we? Dr. Becky has seen thousands of couples over 20 plus years. She's written hundreds of articles about relationships, and she authored the books, I Think I Want Out, What to Do When One of You Wants to End Your Marriage, and she also wrote Congressman's Wife, a political memoir, and if we have time, we'll talk about that too. Her overwhelming goal is to be the kind of marriage counselor and therapist that she always needed but could never find. Dr. Becky, welcome to Older Women and Friends, Stories of Aging Well.
Thank you so much for having me. I was having an out-of-body experience hearing your introduction. I was going like, that lady sounds wacko. But I promise you I'm not. I promise you I'm not.
I know, and I know you're not, but it's just so funny when I first heard that, and then when I tell other people and they go, what? So Before we actually get to those marriages, I really would like you to describe the kind of kid you were.
I was the 5th of 5 kids living in southern Arkansas. And there was a 17-year spread of the children, and I was the youngest. And by 6 years, the one next in line was 6 years older than I was. And what they would always tell me back then is I was so cute and so funny. I was a family court jester, and even in school, I was the class clown. And I always got marks on my report card saying I talked too much. So I was the curious, inquisitive kid. Like, I remember a policeman coming to our elementary school and visiting with our class, and I was like the only kid that asked him questions. I asked like 25 questions, and nobody else did. So I think that was a hint that I was probably going to enjoy being a journalist in my life, because I was very curious, and I remain extremely curious.
And they do say that curiosity is one of those traits that enhances our life experiences, particularly as we age. So, all right, so you were the baby of the family, and you talked about characteristics that you think made very important contributions to you becoming a journalist. So talk a little bit about that. Were you always a writer?
Well, I think I always wanted to be. And, it's like, I guess even painters, like if they've got talent, they don't realize it till they start getting tons of feedback from people, But I lived overseas. I went to college in Paris, France, the first year of college. And so I would write these letters home, and this is in the 1970s. And my parents always said, your letters are amazing. Like, we did not know, like, what a gift you had for writing these things. And my mother died about 5 years ago, and I was going through one of her boxes recently, and she saved every letter I ever wrote. but my parents really encouraged me to read the newspaper, but the hard news didn't appeal to me that much. What I wanted was the advice columns, Dr. Joyce Brothers, Ann Landers, Dear Abby, and then Ladies Home Journal had Can This Marriage Be Saved, which I would devour. And so I put in my head that, boy, it would be nice if I could be an advice columnist someday and write about relationships. So that was my dream from, probably age 15, 16, 17, something like that.
So how did you go about then making sure that dream would come true?
Well, I got deterred because I went to college. My parents, were very big, if you don't go to college, we'll never speak to you again kind of parents, So that would have been a great shame. So even though I was burnt out on school and I've never, I'm one of those students that I'll ace a class that I'm interested in, but if I'm not interested in it, I might get a C or a D. I put my focus on things that I'm interested in, and it's hard to focus on the boring stuff.
Boy, I know that one. It sounds like you just described my son going through school, so I get it.
Well, I have news for him. You can make it through being like that. You can make it through. But because I only applied myself in the classes that I loved, the professors at George Washington University in the journalism department told me that maybe I should consider being a photojournalist, because I took photojournalism classes and I won first place awards all the time, for my photographs. So they were like, well, maybe you should be a photographer instead. And the other thing is they told me that to start off in the career that I would have to start off in a podunk little teeny tiny town and write about house fires and murders and whatnot and crime, and work my way up to being a feature writer. And for me, I was a born feature writer and I wasn't supposed to do anything else. And they told me, well, you can't start. You have to work your way up. So I said, to heck with that, because I'd lived in Paris now. I'd lived in Washington, D.C. in college, and there was no way I was going to go to Beebe, Arkansas and work for the newspaper there and cover those things that didn't interest me. So I went into sales and, went off on because I wanted to make a good living. I wanted the better than average salary in 1982 was, going into sales. Like, I worked for International Playtex, for example.
My God.
Being a manufacturer sales rep, it was a way to make more money than the average person, especially for women during that period of time. But I didn't like sales. I was good at it, but I didn't like it. And so the other thing is I had very low self-esteem back then. And I thought that people that wrote columns and were, prized writers for newspapers were these extraordinary animals, and that I wasn't talented like they were, So that was the other thing is, no one will ever give you a chance. No one will ever give you an opportunity. But I did get married to my kid's dad in 1985 or 87, and we went to Australia and New Zealand for a year for his job. And while I was down there, I created these newsletters. Back then, there was no computers, y'all, no CNN, no cell phones, So I was really down under, and I was bored to my gourd. And so I taught myself to cook while I was down there, and I wrote these crazy newsletters about what we were doing. And that's my mom, and I still have them, and my mom would just go, those newsletters are unbelievable, people would just... So that became a thing. I put out a newsletter once a year after that. And people would tell me, your newsletters are outrageously wonderful. And so I started going like, well, maybe I have something. I don't know. But actually, it was those newsletters that got me my first job at the newspaper, the San Antonio Express News. I had no clippings. I had no journalistic experience. But I drove them nuts until they hired me as a feature writer at the paper. And then within 2 years, I had snagged a column through pure begging and writing them samples all the time. This is the column I would have written about this. See, this is what it would look like. And so they finally gave me a chance. And then the column was so popular. It was a phenomenon in San Antonio. And that was extremely helpful to my self-esteem and thinking, well, I am good enough to do this. And I didn't have to come in and write about hard news. So my professors misled me, you know?
Shame on them.
They definitely were an impediment to my getting started.
Well, you mentioned marrying the father of your children. So let's go back to that because that marriage ended in divorce. So what went wrong?
Well, what went wrong is that, you know, I was a super duper pleaser back then, and I was trying to mold myself to be the woman he wanted me to be. And we had some really, really fundamental differences that I was throwing my own value system under the bus, I think, you know, to be with him. I thought he was an extraordinary husband material. And at that time, he was so loving and so kind to me and just generous. And I just thought I'd hit the husband jackpot. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He's smart as hell, very ambitious and very community minded. And I thought, well, I will hook my caboose onto his engine and life will be okay. But 6 months after we got married and we were down under at that time, we were in Australia, he turned chilly on me. I mean, like literally overnight. He turned chilly on me and then became critical. And he would say things to me like, you're wasting your life. It makes me sick to see you just do nothing with your life. And just, you know, really verbal and emotional abuse. And I felt like I agreed with him. I felt I was supposed to do something, but I just didn't know what it was yet, you know, and I really envied him because he knew what he wanted to do at a very early age. But for me, it was a meandering process, you know, to finally land on what was the right fit for me. And then I realized that the world would accommodate my unique needs for a career, you know, because
was he neuro? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump over.
Was he neuro?
Yes, that's what it sounds like. I've just spoken to many people. They had wonderful courtships and the beginnings of their marriages were as you described. And then suddenly, as you said, someone turns absolutely cold. It's 180 degrees. So, but you were giggling when I said neurodivergent. So that was not his case.
No, I don't see that. I don't see that as a neurodivergent trait. What I do think is that people who are avoidant attached, in order to attract mates, must be seductive on the front end of the relationship. So they give all the energy they can possibly muster to attract you into the relationship. And once the hook is firmly in your mouth and you're like madly in love with this person, then they go back to their natural state of avoidance. So I think he was an extreme avoidant attached. He, you know, at the time, he had just the most traumatic childhood, taken from his mother at like 3 years old in an ugly custody agreement, raised by hard-ass Texas ranchers, you know, and in a German community in the hill country of Texas. And
oh dear,
all they valued was work. So, you know, if I was reading People magazine, you know, he would come in and go, this is absolutely, you know, an abomination that you would waste your time reading the trash. Little did he know I was wanting to write for People magazine.
How long did that marriage last?
We were together 8 years. He was a workaholic, of course, and I didn't realize that he was on this trajectory to be a major community sports medicine man in San Antonio. He ended up becoming the San Antonio Spurs doctor, which was his life dream, you know. But in addition to being a full-time orthopedic surgeon and Spurs doctor, he was the Trinity University doctor. He was a high school doctor for several high schools, attended all their games that he possibly could. He also was president of the San Antonio Sports Foundation, which was an organization that attracted major sports events to San Antonio, like the Olympic Festival or the Final Four or the NBA All-Star Tournament. To say that he was never home is not an understatement. It is not. He was gone all the time. But I think that comes down to his avoidance. But I begged him to stop taking on new responsibilities. I was home with our 2 small children, and he would go, I will after Christmas, or I will in May, and I came to realize that he was a talker and not a doer. He was a doer in his career, but not in his relationship. He would promise me the moon, and he wouldn't deliver. And I finally gave up and realized what he's saying is, I'm not going to do it. And so I lost hope for our marriage. I felt like a single mom who couldn't date. I mean, many people would see me at public events and go, do you have a husband? Who is he? They thought I might be a psycho who had an imaginary husband.
So, and then you got married 2 more times. I guess I'm trying to figure that out and trying to understand how you felt. Was there a sense of failure, for example, or just a decision to give up period when it came to romance and love?
That would have come after number 3. After my kid's dad was number 2, I had a quick starter marriage when I was 24 years old. It lasted a year. And it's not remarkable in any way other than I knew I didn't love him and I married him for a bunch of stupid reasons. And that was, I had many different lessons to learn from each one of those marriages. And I've written blogs about the lessons I learned from my 4 marriages. And so that was, I didn't stand up for myself and call that wedding off like I should have. Number 2 was my kid's dad. And then I was so happily single after that. I was working for the newspaper. I was writing my column, sort of like a Carrie Bradshaw kind of column before she ever wrote a word. I wrote about being a single mom. I wrote about life with, raising my kids and dating and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it became kind of a sensation. And so that was extremely satisfying. And I've never been so happy in my life. And then, the editor of the newspaper, his wife was one of my good friends. Her name was Monica Mackley. And she kept trying to fix me up with this judge in town named Charlie Gonzalez. And when I first met Charlie, I was completely turned off. I just said, oh my God, no, this man is too old for me. He was 13 years older than I was. And he told me I was too old for him.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was the oldest woman he had ever dated. But
red flag.
In any event, I refused to date him for like 2 years. But Monica kept encouraging us just to be friends, So we agreed. We made an agreement to hang out as friends. So we started going to events and stuff together as friends. And one thing led to another, and I started falling in love with him, and he started falling in love with me. And I write all about this in The Congressman's Wife. And then we dated for, 2 or 3 years, and he was a very volatile person, very moody person. And I knew that he was not husband material. And I would tell my girlfriends, I'll never marry him, but he's a wonderful date. He was hilarious. He gossiped just like a woman. He was interested in all the latest scoops, He would sit around and drink wine with the girls and fit totally into the group. I've never known a man like that gossiped like that and was just naughty enough, and just a hoot. Everywhere I took him, people were like, oh my God, he's, the funniest person I've ever met. And he was this district judge, but his dad was the U.S. congressman for San Antonio. And his dad was Henry B. Gonzalez, a very famous congressman who was head of the banking committee, and he was there for 37 years. Well, Henry B. was a legend, sort of like a Martin Luther King in San Antonio, because he had fought for Hispanic rights. And but Henry B. couldn't live forever, and he decided he got sick in his 80s and decided he needed to retire. and Charlie told me he was going to run for his dad's seat. That's when I decided I might marry Charlie Gonzalez. I'm ashamed to say that even though I knew that he was a maniac, and
And you still forged forward. Oh my
I wanted
goodness.
I wanted that Washington experience so bad I could taste it. I could taste it.
Oh.
Remember, I'm curious. I knew that I could smell a compelling story a mile away. And I knew that every day up there was going to be dozens of compelling stories. And so I sold my soul to the devil and married Charlie Gonzalez. And then, so that's the book, The Congressman's Wife, about how we ended up together, the crazy maniacal things he did during our marriage, and all the lessons that I learned. And when I came out, he divorced me after 3 years of marriage. And it literally knocked me on my backside in a way that I had never been knocked before. And by the end of it, I had lost everything. I lost my job at the paper. I couldn't get a job because I was the congressman's wife. Especially couldn't get a job because I was the congressman's ex-wife. I had a little nest egg after my divorce with the orthopedic surgeon. Charlie had helped me encouraged me to spend every dime of that money. And so by the end, it's like my current husband says, I think he was watching your bank account, and when it finally got down to zero, then he filed for divorce. Since then, I'm told he's come out as gay, by the way.
Oh.
Yes.
Now wait, was he the talker?
Which would explain a lot of things, But he did marry twice women after me. So he's also been married 4 times.
So was there a time span after he divorced you where you just hit the skids and I don't know, went into hiding? How did you react?
I had a, dark night of the soul kind of experience, like I came out of there and I lost everything. I lost all my friends. My family turned their back on me. All I had was my kids and myself. And I was going to graduate school at the time to get my degree. I was just going to get my master's at first in marriage and family therapy, but I bonded with all my classmates there, and they were a huge support to me during that time. And we'd all go to dinner after class at night, and they talked me into going further and getting the PhD with them, which I never thought I could ever do, but I somehow managed to pull it off. And I had a very strong voice in my head that said, if you have another relationship like the last 3 marriages, it's going to kill you. And if you don't get your act together and solve this puzzle about why you sabotage yourself like this, then you're going to have a very awful ending to your life. And so I said, okay, then I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to turn my life around, and I'm going to learn how to choose mates, and I'm going to get healthy myself. So I started going to a lot of workshops and conventions and things in the mental health field and learning about various things. I did not have a boyfriend for 10 years. I learned how to be alone. One of my important goals was to be financially supporting myself without any support whatsoever from family or a man. That was a huge goal. And I went to therapy. I learned how to do hypnosis and had hypnosis done on me and worked on a lot of trauma issues. And so I can't even think about how much money I spent going to learn from some of the masters of mental health in this world, literally. Pia Melody, Terry Real, David Burns. I just went and sought out the best of the best and tried to soak up and learn from them. And so I think that in that process, I realized that my family had conditioned me to be kind of an egomaniac, that they really valued their children bringing prominent, powerful people around us to better us. Like we could, by proxy, be more valuable by knowing valuable people. And so they really gave us a lot of positive conditioning. If we would bring home the billionaire in town, their kid or whatever. Oh, you brought home the Murphy. Oh, 4 out of the 5 children ended up having a very serious mental hang-up of hanging around celebrities, sports heroes. It's very strange. And 2 of my siblings still do that in an extreme way. But I had to kill that. I had to kill the need to get to be around these powerful people and to have these like Forrest Gump moments in my life, like finding myself at the State of the Union address, or, I had to like kill my need, my desperation to have those experiences. Now I would love to have the experiences, but I'm not desperate to have them. If they fell in my lap, I would go and I would enjoy it, but it would have nothing to do with feeding my ego anymore.
So at what point, so did you get a PhD in marriage counseling? Is that, wow.
I did. I don't know if people realize, but to get my master's and PhD, that took 5 years. And that's as short a period of time as you could probably do it, because the last year is a dissertation. And a lot of people never finish that part of it, right? But I knew that, after all the money I'd spent on that education, that I damn well better get that degree. So I wrote my dissertation about how people decide to divorce that have been in long-term marriages. And that research that I spent in the library reading every study, every book I possibly could about how marriages deteriorate and die informed the practice that I do today, which is marriage crisis oversight and management, and helping people decide whether they should part or reconcile, and then if they do part, to hold their hand through an amicable process.
It's fascinating because you're such an example of difficulty and challenge and failure, and how you can take those experiences and ultimately make them work for you and allow you to grow and to expand. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into, a lot of detail, but I would like to know if there are any hard and fast, that's probably the wrong description, but you said that you work with people who are at a crisis point in their marriage or in their relationship and trying to decide whether they want to stay or go. Is there any way you can talk about maybe 3 or 4 important questions that you ask of your clients so that they can begin the journey and make a good decision?
One of the most important things is like the way the phenomenon works for the most part is the woman pecks at her man, saying, I need you to be more intimate. I need you to be emotionally close to me. We peck at the dudes, and they may up their game for a few days, but then they fall back to their same old stuff. And then eventually the woman gives up and she thinks she wants out. And the way men do it typically is they keep their mouths shut. They don't tell the female how badly they're struggling in the marriage until it reaches an ending point where it seemingly is out of the blue that they say, I think I want a divorce. And so, I tell people that, number one, FYI, if you're struggling in your marriage and it's serious, you need help now. That's when you need help, is the minute you realize it's serious, and you've got to tell your spouse. So these not telling each other what's going on is a huge, huge problem. But second of all, like say the guy's been thinking about this for 7 years and now he's mustered the guts up to tell his wife he wants a divorce. And I'm going to say, you got kids and your kids are watching you, and they're gonna be wondering, did you give their mother a shot at making it right? And so I think being able to answer that question, what are all the things I did to try to save this marriage? I think that is something that's very important. And some of the people are making divorce decisions without even giving it a shot to repair, and that's just a waste. Unless your spouse is change their sexuality or something, or unless they're abusive or an addict or cheating all the time, there's things that can be done to improve your relationship in a huge way. So, yes, I'm telling people, don't, if your spouse isn't, got serious mental disorders, do everything you can to try and save it. Give the other person a shot at making it right. And here's the thing is, even if you get divorced after that, your stock in the family will be higher because your children will see that you did try everything you could. And that's a big thing people tell me is I needed to know I did everything I could, So that's the thing is don't run till you've at least tried.
My last question, unfortunately, has to do with your clients. Are you, in fact, seeing, in this case, older women more recently or in the last 5 years, say, than before? Because I was really blown away by those statistics. And it just sounds like there are apparently a good deal of older women not only getting divorced, but encouraging the divorce.
I have not noticed a huge population beyond, let's say of all the age group that I normally see is like, let's say 32 to 60. I have had a handful beyond that age, but it's not a huge amount. So I haven't seen a huge amount of that. But I know it's going on, and I certainly have read about it. And it's understandable. I mean, because as you know, as we age, we start taking stock of our life going, hey, the end is closing in on me, and am I living life the way that I want to be living it? It's now, or you realize there's a now or never component to your life, so it makes sense.
It does make sense. And yet, if I'll make a comment about, okay, that's it, I'm out of here, or I hear that from friends, usually we're just kind of bitching, and, the next day, everything is fine. And I remember my parents had very good friends, and I was shocked when I heard that they were getting a divorce, but that they were going to still share their home, and that she was going to live on the first floor and he was going to live on the second, or whichever one, and that they would have separate entrances. And I thought that was the craziest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. And that, I think about that from time to time, and I went, you know what, that wasn't such a bad idea.
Well, that's one of the options I offer for my couples is to not be so black and white about, it's either divorce or we're married. We can come up with a hybrid. And I've had couples move in next door to each other. I've had them move across the street from each other and then be able to have a better relationship. There's also, I think, a movement out there called LAT, Living Apart Together. Have you heard of that?
I have indeed. I actually interviewed the woman who wrote a book on that subject. I'm blocking her name. I'm sorry, I'm blocking her name. But yeah, so why don't you just, tell us what that kind of relationship involves?
It's, perhaps not going through the legal process of divorce, or say you do, but your focus is entirely, raising your kids and all that stuff. So like, if you can just not date people, I think when you start bringing other people around, that's what kind of blows up the original family. In some sort of way. Because now when y'all are all together at events, it's awkward and all this kind of stuff. So I sort of plead with people to keep their love life in the background where nobody knows about it, sees it, and try to get the kids raised and up and out, and then they can do whatever they want. But this hybrid is, two separate households, but still doing things together as a family when you feel like it. But again, you're not flaunting your dates and stuff, and you're keeping all of that off to the side where you don't bring them around kind of stuff.
And my taking away from that was that however, that they are monogamous relationships, that they have both agreed that they will not be involved in other people. So it's like, I love you, honey. I'm here for you. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
But, you live over there and I'll live over here.
Yes.
And,
And you
whenever
can't.
the twain shall meet.
You can do it with the monogamy agreement or not, that we will eventually part even, and I'm negotiating with couples right now, a hybrid agreement for their marriage because they don't want to get a divorce, but they do.
This has been absolutely fascinating, and I wish that we had more time to explore. I'm just delighted that we were able to connect. Thank you so very much. Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined is the 2025 Astra Award-winning weekly podcast dedicated to women 70 to 110 who are rewriting the script on aging. The personal journeys you hear affirm that older women live vital and engaged lives full of courage, contribution, and creativity. Women Over 70 is more than a podcast. Join their Aging Reimagined Circle, which meets monthly online.